Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. We are diving into a genuinely transformative approach to a really complex issue, correctional substance abuse treatment. Specifically, we're unpacking what's known as the Oregon model. If you've ever wondered how a state actually manages that incredibly tricky intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to break down how Oregon handles the whole shebang, from the very first day someone is incarcerated all the way through to their re-entry back into the community.
But right off the bat, we need to ask a really heavy question. What happens when addiction meets incarceration? We've got to treat this with the urgency it demands, because this isn't just about offering some optional medical perk to individuals in custody. Untreated substance use disorder is a massive driver of health, safety, and re-entry crises in correctional settings basically everywhere. This is a critical public safety crisis, and frankly, it affects every single one of us. To make sense of how Oregon is tackling this, here is our roadmap for today. 1. Why correctional treatment matters. 2. Inside Oregon state prisons. 3. Local jails and fast turnovers. 4. Not one size fits all. 5. Planning for re-entry. And finally, 6. The challenges ahead.
Okay, let's dive right in with Section 1, Why Correctional Treatment Matters and the Stakes of Incarceration. We have to start by acknowledging the grave, everyday realities of untreated substance use disorder for people currently in custody.
So I want to pose this directly to you. Why does treatment in custody actually matter? Why should any state dedicate its resources to this? Think about it. If we ignore addiction during incarceration, what are the systemic consequences? The source material makes it crystal clear that Oregon does not view this as just a medical issue. No, they see it as a fundamental public safety and reentry issue.
Let's look at the specific risks of untreated alcohol or drug dependence in these settings. When folks don't get treatment, we see worsened withdrawal risks, which, by the way, can be literally life-threatening. We see escalating mental health symptoms. Inside the facilities themselves, untreated addiction drives up disciplinary problems, making the environment incredibly unsafe for both the staff and the people in custody. And perhaps most critically for the public, there is a significantly higher likelihood of relapse after release. This is exactly why Oregon frames substance use treatment as a core, non-negotiable part of effective incarceration policy.
Now that we understand the stakes, let's move to Section 2, Inside Oregon State Prisons, and their long-term approach. Because state prisons house individuals for longer periods, they're able to take a much more structured, deliberate approach to recovery. For anyone entering the Oregon prison system, intake and assessment start right on day one at the Coffee Creek Center. Literally, right from the start, individuals are clinically evaluated before they're ever assigned to a long-term placement. The Correctional Services Division immediately gets to work coordinating rehabilitative programming, treatment services, and, believe it or not, release planning right then and there. Treatment does not happen by accident in this system. It is meticulously mapped out from the very beginning.
But state prisons are really only half the story. Let's shift gears to Section 3, Local Jails and Fast Turnovers. This is where we see the short-term chaos. The environment here is completely different. It's fast, it's urgent, and the turnover is sky-high.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast within the system. On one hand, you have the state prisons, long-term, highly structured, intake-driven rehab. But then, on the other hand, you have the local county jails. These facilities are dealing with super short stays, rapid turnover, and often extremely limited clinical resources. They simply aren't designed to be long-term behavioral health centers, yet they are quite literally on the front lines of the addiction crisis.
Because local jails aren't all operated the same way, the state has to step in to try and create some consistency. So Oregon uses a jail inspector team. This state team works across county facilities, municipal lockups, juvenile detention centers, you name it. And their goal isn't just to point fingers or find flaws, it's to provide oversight, collaboration, and technical assistance. They want to ensure safe operations and consistent standards, even in these chaotic, short-term holding environments.
To really combat this issue, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission is targeting a very specific window, 2025 to 2027. This represents a massive push to address addiction head-on in these fast-paced jail settings.
During this period, the state is rolling out a jail-based medications for opioid use disorder grant. The focus here is highly practical. It funds local and tribal correctional facilities to reduce major operational barriers. A huge part of this is something that sounds so basic but is absolutely vital: secure medication storage. Because jail stays are so incredibly brief, initiating or discontinuing medication for opioid use disorder is crucial to preventing severe withdrawal, an overdose, or a rapid relapse the second someone is released. This grant directly tackles the logistical nightmare of delivering that care.
Which brings us nicely to Section 4, not one size fits all. Oregon recognizes a really important truth here. When it comes to recovery, one size absolutely does not fit all. You can kind of think of it like a treatment buffet, carefully matched to a person's specific risks and timing.
Oregon uses a really layered approach. Someone entering custody might need intensive or residential care. Actually, Oregon authorizes alternative incarceration programs with a heavy focus on intensive drug and alcohol treatment for exactly this reason. Others might benefit a lot more from outpatient counseling to provide continuous behavioral support. And for others, medication for opioid use disorder is the #1 priority just to keep them stable. The state uses a mix of these approaches across prisons, community corrections, and local jails because matching the right treatment to the right person is literally the only way this works.
However, all of this fantastic in-custody treatment means absolutely nothing if it falls apart the moment a person walks free. Section 5. Planning for re-entry, the critical transition. This return to the community is widely considered the single most dangerous period for an individual's recovery journey. The risk of relapse just skyrockets when someone loses access to medication, housing, or their peer support network.
Oregon's statewide behavioral health system is trying to get ahead of this by focusing heavily on long-term recovery support services, instead of just waiting around for the next crisis to hit. The Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission's 2026 to 2030 Comprehensive Plan is built on 3 core pillars: access, belonging, and connection. The whole philosophy here is that treatment in custody must seamlessly connect to treatment out in the community.
Let's see how this builds a continuous chain of care. A successful discharge plan in Oregon ideally includes these 6 sequential steps. First, early screening and assessment. Second, withdrawal management. Third, ensuring medication continuity. Fourth, ongoing counseling and programming. Fifth, making warm actual handoff referrals to community providers before the person is even released. And finally, planning for housing and transportation. These steps are absolutely essential to building a solid bridge from the highly structured world of corrections back to the freedom of the community.
But let's bring ourselves back to reality for a second here. Section 6, the challenges ahead and the logistical reality. Because despite these strong policies and these really thoughtful plans, massive systemic hurdles are still standing in the way. The state is actually quite transparent about these ongoing challenges. Jails vary wildly in size and staffing from county to county. Prisons have to constantly balance clinical treatment needs with strict security, work schedules, education, and population management. But arguably the biggest hurdle is just maintaining that continuity of care. I mean, an individual might start treatment in a local county jail, get transferred to a state prison, and then return to the community before their program is even finished. Trying to coordinate care across these vastly different jurisdictions is like a giant puzzle, and it depends entirely on local capacity and flawless implementation. So, the crucial point is this. The thematic core of Oregon's entire strategy comes down to one idea. Treatment in custody should not end at the jail or prison door. Treating correctional substance abuse is no longer just some rigid, isolated obligation of the justice system. It's an integrated, essential part of a much larger public health and reentry strategy. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative question to consider. As Oregon pushes forward, will public health and public safety fully integrate? Or will those massive systemic barriers break the fragile continuity of care? It's a hugely complex balancing act of policy, funding, and real human lives. How Oregon navigates this next chapter could very well set the standard for the rest of the country. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.